Papa died today. I'm supposed to be in mourning. Even now the women of the village have gathered at our gate to sing the lament that is ever a part of us. When Abraham and Sarah lived in tents, their honored dead were sung this song. When David fought the Philistines, their heroes were praised with this lament. And now, with Rome at the helm and the crosses of death line our byways, the lament, the wailing is always with us. Soon I will join the women at our gate, but not out of sorrow, but out of obligation. Now you may think me a terrible daughter, but today is a joyous day, if not for me, but for my father. Let me tell you a little bit about him. When we were young, and he was in his prime, he was a worker of leather goods. And it was said in our village that if you needed to walk from here to Temple, well, Micah's sandals would do you. But if you needed to walk home from Egypt, you should have Simeon sandals on your feet. They would last you 40 years. Of course, no sandal lasts 40 years, but my papa made the best. When we would go to Sabbath meeting, afterwards, Mama and I would come home, and Papa would say, "I'll be just a minute," because he was going to stay and speak with the rabbi for a minute about the text of that morning. And oftentimes at evening prayer, my mother would send me down to the synagogue to collect Papa for dinner. And I would find him and the priest with the scrolls, our ancient texts, between them. And they would be discussing the finer points of theology. My Papa was especially interested in the stories about the Messiah. Now, everyone believed that the Messiah, the chosen one of God, would come in their generation. And so my Papa's generation was very much like that. He believed he would see him. And why else would we set an extra place at Passover that we might be able to celebrate and wait for our Messiah? My Papa knew a little bit about him. He knew for sure that he would be born in Bethlehem, the city of David, that his name would be Yeshua, meaning the chosen of God. And so as I grew up, my Papa worked leather and studied the scriptures. My Mama taught me to keep a righteous and kosher home. I married, had a family. They're all married now. And 12 seasons ago, we raised the ancient wail for my mother, who had passed on. And we also pray for my beloved husband, Ben. And now it was just Papa and I. One day at breakfast, my Papa said to me that he had had a vision and that he would not see death until he had seen the Lord's Christ. And so he asked me to take him to Temple that day that he might wait there for him and see him. Well, I reminded Papa that he told me he was to be born in Bethlehem. But he reminded me that they would have to bring the child to Temple for his circumcision and sacrifice. And he would be waiting for him there. So we got into a routine. Each morning I would take Papa to Temple. I would do my chores, and late in the afternoon I would come back and collect him and bring him home. And while he was in temple, he renewed an old friendship with Anna the prophetess, who had been married for 7 years and had lived for 84 in the temple after she was widowed, prophesying and waiting for the Redeemer. Well, one day, when I collected my papa, he told me a very strange story. He said that old Zacharias had been chosen to enter the Holy of Holies for the day of the sacrifice. Now, when a priest enters the Holy of Holies, they enter with a special gown that has bells along the hem of it and a rope about their ankle. The bells are so that the priests who are waiting outside the Holy of Holies can see that the priest is still moving around inside. And if the bells should stop, it would indicate to them that this unlikely priest may have done something to displease God and been stricken down. And the rope about his ankle was that they might pull this hapless priest out, because only one person was allowed to enter the Holy of Holies each year. And so Zacharias went into the Holy of Holies with the special gown and the rope about his ankle. And they could hear him walking about in there, preparing and doing the sacrifice for the year. And then the bells stopped. And my papa said that it seemed like an eternity. Well, none of the priests in their lifetimes had ever had this happen before. And they were just discussing if they should try to pull his hapless body out when the bells began to ring again. And soon Zacharias came out from the Holy of Holies. And Papa said his face was glowing, but he couldn't speak a word. He had obviously seen a vision of some sort. Several months later, we heard rumors that were actually true, that Zacharias and Elizabeth were expecting a child. They are my papa's age. I can't even imagine having a baby at that age. And I asked Papa, would it be possible that they were the parents of the awaited Messiah? And he told me something very interesting. He said the baby would be born of a virgin. Now, I've had 6 babies, and trust me, that idea scared me pretty bad. But he said it wasn't possible for Elizabeth and Zachariah to be the parents of this child. We would have to wait for the Redeemer somewhere else. One day, shortly after this, we got into the routine of coming to and from temple, but no Redeemer. Until one day, I finished my chores early and went to collect my papa. I found the bench where he and Anna would sit, and often I found them there discussing what else? The Messiah. But they weren't there. I looked about in the faces of the crowd, trying to find them, and then I spied them. My papa was walking up to a young couple with a baby. Anna was following behind them. I joined them. He walked right up to them, and I thought to myself, why is he going to this couple? They're regular people. The man, he seemed tall and strong, but quite a bit older than the woman. She seemed like just a baby herself. They were poor. I could tell that from their clothing, and the fact that he only had the bare minimum sacrifice, 2 turtle doves. But he didn't seem embarrassed by that, as some would be, nor had he bought more than they could afford. She seemed bewildered by the opulence and vastness of our temple. It was obvious she had never been there before. But they were so ordinary. how was it possible that he was seeing something in them I could not see? But he walked right up to them, and they didn't seem put off by his approach. He pulled back the blanket from the baby's face. I moved forward so I could see. A little tiny hand popped out of the swaddling, and I heard that suckling sound that babies make. Papa covered his mouth for a moment and then stroked his beard. He held out his hands and indicated that he wanted to hold the child. And the woman put the baby in his arms. With his gnarled fingers, he stroked the baby's cheek. A tear rolled down his cheek and landed on the baby's blanket. He put his hand on its chest and said, "Now, Lord, let thy servant depart in peace, for my eyes have seen thy salvation, a salvation for all people." He gave the baby back to them and raised his hand in blessing. They knelt before him. In the sea of busyness in the temple, these four were a tiny moment in time. Lord, bless these thy earthly parents as they raise this special child. Give them courage and strength for this task at hand. And then suddenly he looked up over his shoulder into the sky. I looked too, but saw nothing. Later he told me that as he blessed the child, a shadow shaped like a cross had passed over the baby's face. But there was only a single dove in the sky. Nothing that would have made that kind of a shadow. They stood. And Papa turned and then looked back at them. He looked long into the woman's face, as if he wasn't sure if he should speak further. And then he did a most uncharacteristic thing. He reached out his gnarled fingers and laid them, shaking, upon the folds of the fabric over the woman's heart, and said, "This child is appointed for the rise and fall of many in Israel, a sign to be opposed. And the sword of his suffering shall pierce your very heart, that many hearts may be comforted." The woman looked at him, a little bewildered perhaps, but then she smiled a bittersweet sort of smile and nodded slightly, touched the child closer to her bosom, as if she already knew. The man put his arm about her to lead her away, and I went to collect my papa. At that very moment, Anna came forth and began to praise God and speak to anyone who would listen about the redemption of Israel. I could hear her speaking as we left the temple, and just before the crowd gathered them about, I looked back one more time as the young woman looked back at Simeon and I have heard it said that sometimes when people get old and they feel that their job is done, they go to bed and wait to die. And I thought that's what Papa would do, because he'd only been promised that he would not see death until he had seen the Lord's Christ. But that's not what happened. He came home and sat on the stoop. Every day we had walked to and for to the temple. I think he enjoyed the company. But now that he had met this little family, he sat on the stoop. Every day I would come out and make him comfortable on the stoop. And he would say, I'm going to take the sun. And he would watch me as we did the chores, laying out the bread, doing laundry, working in the garden. At night, we would sit together with his arm about me, and we would look at the stars. And then at bedtime, he would say to me, Bernice, tuck my neck, and I would tuck him in. And then he would say, I love you. You've been better to me than 7 sons. Do not be sad for me, for I shall die a happy man. And it seemed to me that he had a secret, that he just was looking so forward to going to heaven and speaking of it with our Lord. This morning, when I went to wake him, I found he was dead. But he had a smile on his face. And yes, now I must join the women at our gate to raise the plaintive cry of our ancestors. But again, not out of sorrow, but obligation. For I know that he was a happy man. I hope I live long enough to see this baby grown to manhood and witness the kingdom he shall bring for us. And I hope that I can be half the righteous woman that my papa was, so that when I die, I go to God with a smile on my face. Two things I need to say. One, I thank you for the applause. I appreciate that. But God gave me the ability to write these things and to perform these things. And I give him the praise, because I would not do this if it were not for him. Secondly, if you have never taken a close look at this picture back here, it is the picture of Simeon holding the baby